A quiet man in a simple dark coat steps forward with his boarding pass. No luggage except a small briefcase. He doesn't rush. He doesn't try to stand out. At the counter, the airline agent barely looks at his document before shaking their head. "Sir, please step aside. You're not cleared for this boarding group." The man doesn't argue. He simply waits, eyes moving slowly across the scanner screen, then toward the security line behind him. A faint pause follows, just long enough for the agent to notice something on the system, then quickly close it. A supervisor is called. The decision is repeated louder this time, as if volume makes it more correct. The man is asked to move away from the gate area entirely. He complies without resistance. But just before he turns, a TSA officer at the far end of the terminal suddenly stops walking. Their radio clicks on, once, then again. Within seconds, the entire boarding gate system freezes. And the man's expression doesn't change at all, as if he expected the pause before anyone else did. Something about this delay feels procedural, but not normal, and no one has realized yet why. The boarding gate opens for the next group. A soft chime signals priority passengers. People start moving forward in a loose line, dragging small suitcases across the polished floor. The atmosphere is normal, almost routine, like every other flight before it. A quiet man in a dark coat steps into the line a few seconds after it forms. He doesn't check his phone. He doesn't look around for attention. His briefcase stays close to his side, held by one hand only. Nothing about him calls for notice. At the counter, the airline agent scans the first few passengers quickly. Boarding passes beep, green lights confirm entry, and the flow continues without interruption. Then the man places his boarding pass and passport on the scanner. The agent pauses. It is a small pause, almost invisible, but long enough to be noticed if someone is paying attention. The screen does not immediately confirm. The agent tries again. This time the display loads, but only halfway, a partial record, a name line, a flight match. Then a blank field where clearance status should be. The agent leans slightly closer, narrowing their eyes as if distance might fix the issue. Behind them, the line starts to compress. A passenger shifts weight impatiently. "Sir," the agent says without looking up, "please step aside for a moment." The man doesn't respond verbally. He simply steps half a pace back, just enough to clear the scanner area. No confusion on his face. No irritation, only stillness. The agent calls a supervisor. The supervisor arrives quickly, glances at the screen once, then immediately takes control of the situation as if it is already understood. "Secondary verification," the supervisor says. The words are confident, automatic, not questioned. The man is guided gently but firmly to the side of the counter. The next passenger is already being processed as if nothing unusual happened, but something small breaks the rhythm. The screen, for a fraction of a second, refreshes again. A line of data appears, then disappears before anyone acknowledges it. The agent blinks and continues typing, slightly faster now. The supervisor avoids the terminal display entirely, focusing instead on the boarding pass in hand, as if paper is more reliable than the system in front of them. The man watches everything, not the people, the system. A TSA officer standing near the corridor glances toward the gate monitors. Their radio clicks once. No words are audible, only a short burst of static. They pause, then walk a few steps away from the boarding zone. At the counter, the supervisor repeats the conclusion louder than necessary. "There is no clearance match. We'll need you to step away from the boarding area until this is resolved." The phrasing is formal, practiced. It sounds final even if it isn't fully understood. A few passengers nearby glance over. One of them whispers something under their breath, then looks away quickly. The man does not argue. He does not ask questions. He does not attempt to show documents again. He simply nods once, a quiet acknowledgement. Then he steps back further from the counter, moving toward the edge of the waiting area where the seating begins. As he walks, the boarding system behind the counter flickers again. This time the agent notices. The cursor freezes on the screen for half a second longer than normal. The supervisor finally looks at the monitor fully and then almost immediately shifts their attention away from it. "Proceed with next passenger," they say quickly. But the agent hesitates before continuing, just long enough to check the screen once more, and just long enough to notice that the man's record is not missing. It is being actively held, not deleted, not denied, held. The agent closes the screen window abruptly. The boarding line resumes. The man sits down near the edge of the gate area, placing his briefcase beside him carefully. He does not open it. He does not move again. Across the terminal, a TSA officer stops mid-step. Their radio turns on, once, then again, and in that moment the boarding gate feels slightly less routine than it did a minute ago, though no one can explain why. The man looks toward the glass walls of the terminal, watching reflections of movement, light, and shifting staff positions. He says nothing, but he is no longer simply waiting for a flight, and something in the system has already started responding to him without announcing it out loud. The boarding gate continues moving, but the rhythm has changed. It no longer feels smooth, it feels managed. Passengers are still being scanned, still walking through the gate, but the staff's attention is divided now. More glances toward internal screens, more pauses between confirmations. The quiet man remains seated near the edge of the waiting zone. His briefcase stays exactly where he placed it, untouched, unopened. A supervisor steps away from the counter and speaks into a headset in a low voice. The words are not fully audible, but fragments pass through. "Secondary hold, verification status, system mismatch." At the counter, the agent continues processing passengers, but their fingers slow slightly between inputs. They are no longer just scanning. They are waiting for something to resolve itself in the background. A TSA officer appears closer to the gate than before. They do not approach the man directly. Instead, they stand at an angle where they can see both the boarding line and the system monitors. Their posture suggests monitoring, not engagement. A few passengers begin to notice the delay. One looks at their watch. Another sighs. A third whispers, probably just a system error. That assumption spreads quickly. It is comfortable, simple. The supervisor returns to the counter and takes full control of the situation again. "Everything is normal," they say firmly. "We are following standard procedure." The phrase lands like closure, but behind them the system screen does something unusual. A small red indicator flashes once, then disappears. No alarm sounds, no warning tone, nothing visible to passengers, only staff notice it, and none of them mention it. The supervisor leans slightly toward the agent. "Ray, run the verification manually," they say. The agent hesitates. Manual Ray run means bypassing the automatic clearance path. It is not unusual, but it is not routine for a standard boarding issue either. Still, they comply. The man's passport is scanned again. This time the screen loads faster, too fast, but the result does not stabilize. His details appear fully for half a second, complete record, clean layout matching flight. Then the clearance field goes blank again. The agent stops typing, just for a moment, then continues as if ignoring what was just seen. The supervisor watches the screen closely but avoids reacting too strongly. Instead, they adjust their stance, shifting weight from one foot to the other. "Could be sync lag," they say. It sounds like explanation, but it feels like reassurance to themselves as much as anyone else. The TSA officer at the side corridor raises their radio slightly. No one hears what is said, but a second officer farther down the terminal begins moving toward the gate area. Not running, just moving faster than before. The man remains still. He has not spoken since being asked to step aside, but his eyes move slowly across the environment, not toward people, but toward patterns. The repeated scanning of the same document, the supervisor avoiding direct screen contact, the brief flickers of red status on the system, the way staff stops speaking when alerts appear, a pattern forms quietly. Not obvious enough for passengers, but obvious enough for those trained to see systems. The supervisor finally addresses the situation publicly again. "Sir," they say toward the seated man, voice controlled and professional, "this appears to be a clearance inconsistency. We are resolving it. You may need to remain in the waiting area for a short while." The wording is careful, not denial, not permission, just containment. The man gives a slight nod again, no protest, no question. A few passengers now fully accept the situation as minor inconvenience. One even shakes their head as if the man is simply unlucky. The boarding process continues for others, but the system behind the counter refreshes again. This time the agent does not miss it. A hidden field appears briefly. "Review status, manual hold active." The supervisor sees it at the same moment and quickly turns away from the screen, too quickly, as if looking at it for too long might change something. A TSA officer speaks quietly into their radio. This time a response comes immediately, short, direct, and serious enough that the officer's posture changes. They step back from the gate line, one step, then another. The boarding area is still operational, but now it feels observed from multiple sides at once. The man adjusts his position slightly on the chair, not uncomfortable, just repositioning, as if waiting for something that is already in motion. The supervisor claps once, soft, controlled. "Next passenger," they say. But their eyes do not leave the system console for long, and for the first time, the staff are no longer acting like they are fixing a simple passenger issue. They are acting like they are waiting for confirmation from something they cannot fully see yet. The man is still silent, but the system around him is no longer behaving like it belongs only to the airport. The gate slowly returns to motion, but the feeling of normality doesn't fully come back. Passengers keep boarding one after another, yet attention keeps drifting, like people are trying to ignore something they've already noticed. The quiet man remains seated near the edge of the waiting zone. Same position, same briefcase beside him. No movement unless necessary. To most passengers, he now looks like a delayed traveler with a documentation issue. Nothing unusual. These things happen. That assumption spreads naturally. A woman nearby leans toward her companion and whispers, "Probably passport mismatch." Her companion nods without looking again. A man standing in line glances at the seated figure and quickly looks away, as if deciding it is not his concern. The staff continue processing boarding, but their behavior has subtly changed. The agent at the counter scans the next passenger's ticket successfully, but their eyes flick once toward the man before returning to the screen. The supervisor stays slightly behind the counter now, not fully engaged in passenger flow, but watching the system terminal more than anything else. A TSA officer stands closer to the corridor entrance than before, not intervening, just positioned. The man remains still, but his eyes shift once toward the counter monitor. A new action appears briefly on the system, not an alert, not a warning. Just a line of text. "Verification path, pending secondary authority." It vanishes almost instantly. The agent sees it. Their fingers pause above the keyboard, then continue typing as if nothing happened, but their rhythm changes, slightly slower, more deliberate. A second scan is triggered manually again for the man's documents. This time the system behaves differently, not wrong, not missing, delayed. Each field loads one by one instead of all at once. Name, passport number, flight match. And stops. The clearance section hesitates before filling. A faint flicker appears on the screen, red, gone. The supervisor steps in immediately, leaning closer to the monitor. "This is still under review," they say, voice steady but lower now. "Do not escalate it unnecessarily." The word unnecessarily is not aimed at passengers. It is aimed at the system. A TSA officer at the corridor adjusts their stance. One step backward, then forward again, like they are receiving conflicting instructions. Passengers are now more focused on their own flights again. The delay is becoming background noise, but small inconsistencies continue. A boarding pass prints twice for one passenger. A seat assignment briefly shows as unassigned before correcting itself. A system refresh occurs without input. None of it stops operations, but it interrupts confidence. The man remains observant. He does not look at people, he looks at reactions, at hesitation, at avoided screens. At the way staff stop speaking mid-sentence when the system changes, the supervisor finally addresses the gate again. Everything is proceeding normally, they say, slightly firmer now. Please continue boarding. But they do not look at the man when saying it, not even briefly, as if direct acknowledgement would complicate something already unstable. A passenger near the front of the line raises a small complaint about delay. The agent responds quickly, professionally. Just standard verification delay. The phrase travels again, standard, procedure, normal, but none of the staff repeat it with full certainty anymore. The TSA officer receives another radio message, this one longer. Their posture tightens. They look down the corridor toward a side terminal door that is usually unused during boarding. Then they step away, not toward the man, not toward the counter, away from the gate entirely. That movement is noticed by the supervisor. For the first time, the supervisor's expression changes slightly, less control, more evaluation. The man shifts his briefcase a few centimeters closer to his leg. A small movement, almost nothing, but intentional. The system terminal flashes again, this time longer, enough for the agent to stop pretending they didn't see it. A new line appears. Review status escalated, internal flag detected. The supervisor sees it fully now. They do not speak immediately. Instead, they inhale slowly through their nose. Then turn the monitor away slightly, not off, just angled. As if reducing visibility changes reality, the boarding line continues. But the rhythm is now divided into two layers, passengers moving forward and staff quietly reacting to something they are not explaining. The man remains seated, unmoved, unbothered, but no longer ignored in practice, only in conversation. And for the first time, the system is no longer just checking him. It is starting to reorganize itself around him. The boarding gate is still functioning, but it no longer feels stable in the way staff expect systems to feel. Everything continues, scans, boarding calls, seat confirmations, but underneath it something is slightly misaligned. The quiet man remains seated in the same position, briefcase untouched, back straight, eyes calm. He is not watching people anymore. He is watching timing. At the counter, the agent scans a boarding pass. It beeps green. Then, without input, the screen briefly refreshes. The same passenger appears twice in the system for less than a second. Then it corrects itself. The agent freezes for half a beat, then continues. As if that half second did not matter, but it does, because now it is not a single error, it is repetition. A second passenger approaches the counter. Their boarding pass scans normally, but the seat assignment field flickers, empty, then filled, then empty again before stabilizing. The passenger doesn't notice, but the agent does. They swallow slightly before continuing. Behind them, the supervisor stands closer to the main terminal screen than before, not touching it, not interacting directly, just watching, like distance makes it safer. A TSA officer reappears near the gate corridor, not where they were before. This time they are closer to the secondary exit route, an area usually not used during standard boarding. Their radio is on. No audible speech reaches the counter, but the officer's expression tightens after each brief transmission. Then they stop responding verbally altogether, just listening. The man remains still, but now his attention shifts slightly toward the system console again. A new line appears, long enough to be read this time. Sync delay across verification NODES. The agent reads it, does not say anything, deletes nothing, just continues working faster than before as if speed can outrun meaning. The supervisor notices the change in pace. Don't rush, they say quietly, but the instruction sounds unnecessary because no one is rushing, they are compensating. A passenger complains about boarding delay again. The staff respond with practiced calm. System delay, please remain patient. The phrase is now becoming fragile, not because it is wrong, but because it is being repeated too often. At the far end of the terminal, a boarding display briefly goes blank, then reloads. Then shows the wrong flight number for half a second. A passenger notices and points. An agent immediately corrects it manually, but their hand lingers on the keyboard longer than needed afterward. The TSA officer steps away from the corridor wall. 2 steps this time, then stops. They look toward the ceiling-mounted cameras, then toward the gate monitors, then away again, like confirming something without saying it out loud. The man shifts his gaze slightly toward the counter, not the people. The system terminal. Another message appears. Access path hold MULTI agency review active. This time, the supervisor does not hide their reaction quickly enough. A small tightening of the jaw. A brief pause before breathing continues normally. They step closer to the agent. Do not escalate this visually, they say. The agent nods without looking up, but their typing slows. The system is no longer behaving like a single database. It behaves like multiple systems disagreeing silently. A boarding pass is scanned again. This time it takes longer to confirm, not failure, delay. A passenger looks around. Is everything okay? They ask. The agent responds too quickly. Yes, just processing. Too fast to be fully confident. The man finally adjusts his posture slightly, not changing position, just redistributing weight. The briefcase shifts a few centimeters. The TSA officer receives another radio transmission. They turn their head immediately. This time they do not move toward the gate. They move toward the side access door near the jet bridge control panel. Not running, not rushing, but now clearly redirected. The supervisor notices, and this time they do not try to maintain calm visibility for passengers. Their attention splits, half on the system, half on the movement of TSA personnel. The agent accidentally triggers a duplicate scan again. This time, it doesn't correct immediately. For 3 full seconds, the system shows. Passenger record duplicated authorization path, then it disappears. But not before the supervisor sees it fully. They stop speaking, completely. The boarding line continues, but now even passengers feel it, not as an announcement, as silence between actions. The man remains calm, but the system around him is no longer behaving like it belongs to routine airport operations. It is behaving like something is being reviewed from outside the airport itself, and that review is getting closer. The gate area no longer feels like a single space of movement. It feels divided between people boarding and people quietly adjusting to something they cannot fully name. The quiet man stays seated near the edge of the waiting zone. Same posture, same briefcase, no visible urgency, but his attention has changed slightly. He is no longer just watching the system. He is watching who stops looking at it. At the counter, the agent is working faster now, but not more efficiently. Every scan completes, yet every completion feels delayed in awareness, like confirmation is arriving too late to feel certain. The supervisor stands slightly behind them, no longer giving continuous instructions. Instead, they are listening to updates, to pauses, to what is not being said. A TSA officer stands near the corridor intersection, no longer fixed in place. They shift position once, then again, subtly adjusting sightlines between gate monitors and the side access corridor. Their radio is on again, but this time they are not responding immediately. They are waiting between transmissions. That hesitation is new. The man remains still, but now his gaze briefly moves to the boarding display above the gate. It flickers once. A normal passenger would miss it, but staff do not. A flight status briefly shows. Boarding active, secondary review in progress, then it returns to normal boarding text. No explanation follows. The agent pauses mid-scan, just for a second, then continues as if trained not to react to interruptions, but their hand tightens slightly on the scanner. Behind them, the supervisor steps closer to the system console again. This time, they do not hide their presence near it. They study it openly, but carefully avoid touching anything. A passenger nearby shifts their bag and looks toward the gate screen. Is there a delay or not? they ask. The agent responds automatically. No delay, everything is normal. But the timing of the answer is slightly off, a fraction too late. At the far end of the terminal, a TSA officer stops again, this time not because of a call, because they are watching a separate monitor mounted near the corridor ceiling. Something on it changes, not loudly, not visibly alarming, but enough to alter posture. They step back half a step, then speak into their radio again, short, controlled. The supervisor notices that reaction, and now their focus sharpens, not on passengers, not on boarding, on coordination. The man shifts his gaze once more, this time toward the supervisor. For the first time, there is almost direct awareness between them, not confrontation, not acknowledgement, but shared presence in the same unresolved space. The system terminal at the counter refreshes again. A new message appears longer than before. Verification layer cross-referenced with external legal authority node. The agent stops completely. Does not type. Does not scan, just reads. The supervisor sees it at the same moment. And this time they do not attempt to angle the screen away. They step closer, still not touching it, just reading, slowly. A second TSA officer appears near the corridor entrance. They do not speak to anyone. They stand beside the first officer. Now 2 points of attention exist where there was one before. Passengers continue boarding, unaware of the exact reason for the tension. But they feel it in smaller ways. Slower responses, shorter confirmations, slightly delayed smiles from staff, longer pauses before approved. The man remains seated. But now the environment is no longer just reacting to him. It is coordinating around something linked to him. The supervisor finally speaks again, quietly, not to passengers, to the agent. Do not override anything, they say. The agent nods, but does not look relieved, because for the first time the system is not asking for input. It is issuing updates, and those updates are no longer local. They are coming from beyond the gate itself. The TSA officers exchange a brief glance, no words, just confirmation. Then one of them moves toward the side access door again, this time opening it slightly before stopping. Listening inside, the man adjusts his position a fraction. Still calm, still silent, but now fully aware that whatever is happening is no longer contained within airport procedure. It is expanding outward, and the system is no longer pretending otherwise. The boarding gate is still active, but it no longer feels like a place where decisions are being made locally. It feels like a place where decisions are being received. The quiet man remains seated near the edge of the waiting zone. Same position, same briefcase, no visible change in expression. But now more people are aware of where he is sitting, even if they are not acknowledging it directly. At the counter, the agent has stopped reacting to minor glitches, because they are no longer minor. A scan completes normally, but the confirmation arrives 3 seconds late. Another passenger is cleared, but their seat assignment changes after they have already moved forward. The system is still functioning, but its timing is fractured. The supervisor stands closer to the counter than before, no longer speaking casually. Every instruction is shorter now. Continue boarding. Do not interrupt scans. Log everything. No explanations, just control. A TSA officer appears at the side corridor door again, this time staying near it longer. They do not enter. They do not leave. They remain positioned like they are waiting for authorization that hasn't fully arrived yet. Their radio is active, but their responses are minimal. One-word acknowledgements. The man remains still. But now he is no longer ignored by staff awareness. He is avoided, not directly, subtly. A glance that does not stay too long, a monitor that is turned slightly away, a conversation that stops mid-sentence when he shifts his gaze. A new message appears on the system terminal. Boarding continuity maintained under temporary override protocol. The agent reads it but does not speak. The supervisor sees it and exhales slowly through the nose. Not relief, recognition. At the far end of the terminal, a boarding screen goes dark for almost 5 seconds, long enough for passengers to notice. A small murmur spreads. An announcement follows immediately. technical adjustment. Please remain patient." The phrase is now less convincing than before. A TSA officer finally steps through the side access door, but stops immediately inside as if receiving instructions through their earpiece. They turn their heads slightly, listening, then step back out again. The door closes softly. The supervisor notices this movement, and their attention shifts fully away from passengers now. Something is no longer being handled at gate level. It is being redirected upward. The agent attempts another scan. The system hesitates, then produces a new status. Security clearance review, MULTI layer authorization required. The agent does not continue scanning after that. They wait. The supervisor steps in, reads it, does not touch the screen. A passenger behind the line asks again, more clearly this time, "Is something wrong with the flight?" The agent responds instantly, "No, everything is normal." But this time, even the passenger does not fully believe it. The TSA officer receives a longer radio transmission. They turn slightly away from the gate, then respond, this time with more than one word, still controlled, still official, but different. They step away from the corridor entrance, not toward the man, not toward the counter. Toward the service corridor that leads deeper into airport operations. The supervisor watches them leave, and now their expression changes, because that movement is not procedural anymore, it is escalation. The man remains seated, but his posture shifts slightly forward, not alert, not tense, just present, like someone waiting for a system to finish aligning. The boarding gate continues to operate, but it is no longer operating independently. Every action now appears to be passing through unseen layers above it, and those layers are no longer silent, they are responding. The boarding gate is still moving passengers forward, but the system behind it is no longer behaving like a single source of truth. It behaves like fragments that no longer agree with each other. The quiet man remains seated at the edge of the waiting zone. Same position, same briefcase, no visible urgency. But now even the staff who avoid looking at him still check his direction between tasks, like their attention is being pulled without permission. At the counter, the agent tries another standard scan. The result appears instantly. Too instantly. The system shows full clearance for half a second. Then it changes, then changes again. 3 versions of the same record appear in sequence, each slightly different. One shows clear, one shows review hold. One shows external verification required. The agent stops moving, does not speak, just stares. The supervisor steps closer immediately, not touching the screen, just reading, slowly, like reading a document that should not exist in multiple versions at once. A TSA officer reappears at the corridor intersection, but this time they are not alone. A second officer stands beside them, both facing a small wall-mounted operations monitor. They are not speaking. They are listening to instructions, but those instructions seem to be changing mid-reception. The man remains still, but now his eyes shift slightly toward the counter again, not curiosity, observation. At the system terminal, a new line appears. Record integrity variance detected across agency NODES. The agent reads it silently. Their hand leaves the scanner. The supervisor exhales again, but this time it is sharper, controlled frustration, not panic, not confusion, something closer to recalculation. Passengers in line begin to sense delay again. A man in the queue leans forward. "Are we boarding or not?" The agent responds quickly. "Yes, we are continuing." But their voice is flatter than before. At the far side of the terminal, a boarding screen briefly shows the wrong flight destination. It corrects itself instantly, but 2 passengers notice. They exchange a look, no words, just uncertainty. The TSA officers at the corridor shift position at the same time, synchronized, not coordinated visibly, but aligned as if responding to the same unseen update. One of them speaks briefly into their radio. The reply comes back faster than before, and this time the officer does not hesitate. They turn and walk deeper into the service corridor again. The supervisor watches them disappear. And now their focus is no longer on maintaining boarding flow. It is on what is happening beyond the gate. The agent attempts another scan. The system does not respond immediately. Instead, a delayed response appears. Access logs differ between local and central authority databases. The agent finally speaks quietly. This doesn't match. The supervisor does not answer because they are already seeing it. The man shifts slightly in his seat, not enough to draw attention, but enough that the system seems to respond again. Another update appears. Legal authority flag VERIFIED, confirmation pending cross-agency resolution. This time the supervisor does something they have not done before. They step back from the counter entirely. Not because of passengers, not because of procedure, but because the system is now contradicting itself in real time. A TSA officer returns briefly to the corridor entrance, looks toward the gate, then immediately steps away again. No explanation, no engagement, just movement between points of instruction. Passengers begin to feel it more clearly now. Not panic, not alarm, just hesitation in every action around them. The man remains calm, but now the environment is no longer treating him as a boarding issue. It is treating him as a node in a larger unresolved system. And that system is no longer contained inside the airport. It is splitting across it. The airport does not announce anything dramatic. There is no siren, no emergency tone, no visible alarm, but the change is immediate. Subtle systems begin to slow at the same time across different points of the terminal. Boarding gates that were active seconds ago pause mid-process. Scanners remain on, but responses delay longer than normal. The quiet man is still seated near the edge of the waiting zone. Same posture, same briefcase, no visible reaction, but now even passengers who were not paying attention before begin to feel the shift. At the counter, the agent tries a standard scan. Nothing happens for 2 seconds. Then the screen updates, but without the usual confirmation sound. A single line appears. Temporary terminal security freeze initiated. The agent freezes, does not speak. The supervisor reads it immediately from behind. Their face changes, not into panic, but into recognition that this is no longer a gate-level issue. This is system-wide. Across the terminal, boarding screens begin to shift simultaneously. Some go blank, some display hold. Some simply stop updating. Passengers look around now. Questions begin forming, but no one has full answers. A man in line asks, "Is this a delay or something else?" The agent replies carefully, "We are following instructions from Central Operations." That answer is new, because Central Operations is not something usually mentioned to passengers. At the corridor intersection, TSA officers are no longer standing still. One of them speaks into their radio. This time there is no delay in response. The reply is immediate, short, authoritative. Both officers turn toward the service corridor door at the same moment, and this time they enter. The door does not close behind them immediately. It remains slightly open for a second longer than normal. Like the system itself is still deciding whether to fully commit to what is happening. The supervisor steps away from the counter entirely now, not addressing passengers, not instructing staff, just watching the monitors. The agent is no longer scanning anything. The system is locked at a procedural level. A new message appears. MULTI agency override active verification lockdown in effect, the agent whispers without realizing it. This is not a normal hold. The supervisor does not correct them because they agree. Passengers begin to grow more alert now, not fearful, but aware that movement is restricted without explanation. The boarding process has stopped completely. No announcements are made immediately. Silence fills the operational space where instructions used to be. The man remains seated, but now the entire gate area subtly orients around his position without anyone instructing it. Staff glance in his direction more frequently, then away. Then back again, like confirmation is happening in their minds, not their screens. A TSA officer briefly reappears at the corridor entrance. They stop, look toward the gate, then speak a single phrase into their radio. Immediately, their expression tightens. They step back inside the corridor. The supervisor finally speaks aloud, not to passengers, to the staff. Do not attempt local override. No one responds, because no one is currently attempting anything. The system itself is locked above them. The screens now display a final unified status across multiple terminals. Terminal hold, external legal authority review in progress. That line does not change. It does not flicker. It stays. Passengers begin to understand this is not a normal delay, but still no one knows why. The man remains calm, unmoved. But now there is no doubt left in the environment. This is no longer a boarding issue. It is a coordinated system pause. And whatever triggered it is not local to the gate anymore. It is above it. The terminal does not restart. It simply releases slowly, without announcement. One monitor at a time begins to return to normal boarding screens, not all at once, not cleanly, more like a system carefully undoing a decision it never explained. The quiet man is still seated near the edge of the waiting zone. Same posture, same briefcase. No movement that signals urgency or relief. At the counter, the agent watches the screen as the final locked status disappears. No sound accompanies it, just absence. The supervisor leans slightly forward, reading the restored interface as if expecting another restriction to appear. Nothing does. A final line briefly flashes. Review closed, status corrected, then it vanishes. The agent exhales without realizing they were holding their breath. But no one celebrates. No one comments, because there is no explanation attached to the correction. At the corridor entrance, TSA officers return in silence. Not rushing, not announcing, just returning to their original positions as if they never left. The boarding screens stabilize fully now. Flight details normalize, seat assignments stop shifting, system delays disappear. Passengers begin to move again, slowly at first, unsure whether the pause is truly over. A few glance at staff for confirmation. The agent nods. Yes, boarding will resume. The tone is careful. Not because something is still wrong, but because something was clearly not understood. The man finally stands, not abruptly, not as a signal, just naturally, as if his waiting time has reached its end without needing permission. He picks up his briefcase. No one stops him, no one speaks to him. The supervisor watches him briefly, not with suspicion anymore, not with authority either, just observation, like trying to understand a decision that has already been finalized somewhere else. The man walks toward the boarding lane. His pace is steady, unremarkable. Passengers step aside instinctively, not because they are told to, but because the flow has already resumed around him. No one mentions the earlier hold. No staff member explains it. No passenger fully understands it, but something has changed in how the system behaves, not because it was fixed loudly, but because it corrected itself quietly. At the gate scanner, his boarding pass is scanned again. This time it responds instantly. Green, clear, no hesitation, no delay. The agent looks at the screen, then at him, then back at the screen, but says nothing. The man continues forward. No confrontation follows him. No acknowledgement of what happened before, only controlled movement returning to routine. Behind him, the terminal returns fully to boarding activity. But the staff no longer treat the system as something fully predictable. They glance at screens a little longer now. They pause a little more before confirming. At the corridor junction, a TSA officer watches him pass. They do not speak, but they subtly adjust their posture as if marking the end of an internal instruction cycle. The man does not look back. He reaches the jet bridge and disappears into it. No announcement is made about what happened. No explanation is recorded for passengers. Only one quiet internal correction remains in the system logs before it is archived beyond visible access. And the gate returns to normal operation. Not as it was before, but as it now understands it must remain.